stuff unfolds as a quiet but heavy beginning, centered on Elias Granger's emotional state rather than action, establishing the story's core conflict, survival without love. Elias is introduced as a man shaped by isolation, the mountains mirroring his inner world, cold, disciplined, and unforgiving. He is not climbing toward hope but retreating from disappointment, having learned through years of solitude that desire only weakens resolve. His decision to accept a church-arranged marriage is not romantic. It is practical, almost transactional, rooted in the harsh truth that winters in the high mountains do not forgive loneliness. The marriage, to him, is a tool, another axe, another fire, another necessary structure to endure life. Elias carefully defines the limits of what he will offer his future wife: shelter, safety, respect, and nothing more. By doing so, he tries to protect both of them from expectation, believing that love belongs to warmer places and easier lives. The mountain cabin becomes a symbol of this belief, solid, spare, built to withstand storms but not to invite softness. As he prepares the space, his thoughts reveal a man who has already accepted emotional emptiness as a permanent condition. He does not resent marriage. He simply strips it of hope. The tone emphasizes restraint, with Elias sealing his heart as firmly as he seals the cabin against the coming winter. This part is crucial because it establishes how deeply Elias has convinced himself that love is a liability, not a gift. His mindset sets the stakes for the story. The transformation required to rewrite his fate will not be small or sudden. By the end of part 1, the reader understands that Elias is not cold by nature, but by necessity, or so he believes. The mountain, the marriage, and the silence all align into a single expectation: endure, survive, and ask for nothing more. This makes the arrival of Clara in the next part not just a new character, but a direct challenge to everything Elias thinks he knows about strengths, companionship, and the cost of letting someone truly in. Shifts the story's tension from isolation to disruption, focusing on Clara Whitlow's arrival and the immediate, quiet way she unsettles Elias's carefully controlled world. When she steps into the mountain cabin, she does not embody the fear or resignation Elias has prepared himself for. Instead, she carries a composed resolve that feels out of place in such a harsh setting. Her posture, her steady gaze, and her refusal to lower her eyes signal a woman who has already endured hardship and refuses to be diminished by it. These challenges Elias instantly, though he does not name it as such. He had expected fragility, silence, perhaps bitterness, but Clara arrives with questions, curiosity, and an unspoken decision to claim her place, rather than tolerate it. The mountain does not intimidate her. She studies it as if measuring herself against it, not surrendering to it. Elias responds by tightening his emotional distance, speaking little and watching more. Attempting to maintain the emotional boundaries he set in part 1, yet Clara's presence introduces a new kind of silence, one that is not empty but observant. She does not fill the space with nervous chatter or pleading for reassurance. Instead, she listens, adapts, and moves through the cabin as if she intends to stay for the long haul. Her actions speak louder than words. She asks where she can help, studies the tools, learns the rhythm of the place without complaint. This unsettles Elias more than any argument could, because it denies him the comfort of emotional superiority. He cannot see himself as the sole provider of strength. That night, when Clara speaks of the mountains with respect rather than fear, Elias realizes she is not merely enduring this life, she has chosen it. The realization plants the first crack in his certainty. Still, he resists, reminding himself that expectations lead to disappointment. She frames her competence as temporary, her calm as a mask that will eventually fall. Yet, even as he retreats to sleep against the wall, the image of her steady presence lingers. Part 2 is essential because it introduces Clara, not as a romantic force but as a quiet equal, someone whose strength does not confront Elias directly but stands beside him, forcing him to recognize a truth he has long avoided. Companionship does not always arrive asking for permission. Sometimes it arrives prepared, grounded, and unafraid, and that is far more dangerous to a guarded heart than weakness ever could be. Deepens the emotional shift by focusing on the subtle, almost reluctant thawing of Elias's inner world. showing how connection begins not with declarations, but with repetition and presence. The days settle into a rhythm shaped by snow, labor, and shared space. And it is within this routine that Clara's influence quietly grows. She does not demand intimacy or push against Ilias's silence. Instead, she respects it, which paradoxically draws him closer. Her work around the cabin is steady and unshowy, repairing what is broken, learning what she does not know, and accepting mistakes with a soft humor that brings unexpected warmth into the Starks. Elias observes these moments from a distance, telling himself they mean nothing, yet his attention betrays him. He notices how the cabin feels different when he returns from the cold, how the air smells of bread or stew, how the fire is already tended. These are small things, but to a man who has lived years without being anticipated, they feel dangerously significant. Clara hums while she works, a sound so gentle it barely registers as music, yet it unsettles Elias more than the howling wind outside. It suggests contentment, not forced endurance, and it stirs something he believed long buried. He fights this response internally, reminding himself that this marriage was never meant to include emotional dependence. He fears that acknowledging comfort will lead to expectation, and expectation to loss. Still, his resistance weakens. He begins to linger near the table, instead of retreating immediately, begins to listen rather than merely hear. Silence between them changes character. It becomes shared rather than solitary. The mountain, once only a test of endurance, starts to feel less hostile, though Elias refuses to credit Clara for that shift. This part is crucial because it illustrates how love often enters guarded lives sideways, through consistency rather than confrontation. Elias does not choose vulnerability here. It creeps in through habit, through being seen without asking. The warmth that grows is not dramatic but persistent, and that makes it harder to deny. By the end of part 3, Elias has not admitted his feelings, not even to himself, but the foundation of his emotional armor has begun to soften. The reader understands that the true danger to Elias is no longer the mountain or the winter, it is the realization that he might want this life not just to survive, but to share, and that wanting is the very thing he has spent years training himself to avoid. Serves as the emotional fracture point of the story, where Elias's belief in self-reliance finally collides with his own physical limits and forces him to confront the truth he has been avoiding. Perfect. The blizzard is not just a natural event, but a manifestation of the life Elias has chosen: unforgiving, relentless, and indifferent to pride. When the storm descends, it strips away routine and control, replacing them with urgency and danger. Elias reacts as he always has, by facing the threat alone. See. He goes onto the roof to secure the beam, not because it is wise, but because it aligns with the identity he has built for himself, a man who endures without help. The cold, however, does not respect that identity. As the wind lashes and the snow blinds him, Elias is reduced from mountain man to fragile body. And when he collapses inside the cabin, the illusion of invincibility finally shatters. What follows is the most intimate moment of the story so far. Not because of romance, but because of necessity. Clara does not panic or hesitate. She acts. She pulls him close, uses her own body heat, tends the fire, and stays awake through the night, whispering to him, anchoring him to consciousness. In this moment, the traditional roles Elias has clung to dissolve. See. He is no longer the protector, and she is no longer the dependent wife of convenience. They are simply two humans fighting for one life. Elias drifts in and out of awareness, and in those moments, something fundamental changes. He feels what it is like to be needed not for strength, but for existence. When dawn arrives and the storm loosens its grip, Elias wakes to a reality he cannot dismiss. Clara saved him, but more importantly, she chose him. Stayed when leaving would have been easier. Risked herself without obligation. His emotional defenses, once rigid as ice, crack under the weight of that truth. He does not pull away when he realizes how close they are, and that stillness is significant. It marks the first time Elias allows vulnerability without immediately punishing himself for it. Part 4 is essential because it transforms the relationship from quiet coexistence into shared survival. Love does not announce itself here, but dependence does. And for a man who has equated dependence with weakness, this is both terrifying and transformative. The storm breaks more than the weather, it breaks the wall Elias built around his heart. leaving an opening through which the rest of the story must now flow, turns inward, slowing the pace to allow emotional truth to surface. And it is here that understanding replaces distance as the foundation of Elias and Clara's bond. After the storm, the cabin feels different not because of any visible change, but because something unspoken now lives between them. Elias is physically weakened, forced into stillness, and this loss of motion mirrors the loosening of his emotional restraint. Clara, caring for him with quiet consistency, finally allows herself to speak not as a capable partner in labor, but as a woman shaped by her own history. She reveals a past marked by invisibility, by being valued only for usefulness, never for choice. Strength, she explains, was not something she cultivated to be admired, but something she learned because no one else would protect her softness. Her decision to come to the mountains was not an act of desperation, but of a gentler refusal to live a life dictated by others' expectations. This confession reframes everything Elias thought he understood about her. Ski. He realizes that her calm is not navit, her resilience not luck, but deliberate survival. In response, Elias speaks in a way he never has before, admitting that his distance was never indifference, but fear that needing someone would undo him. Fear that love would demand a cost he could not afford to pay again. B. The conversation unfolds without drama or tears, just honesty, and that restraint makes it more powerful. They do not reach for each other physically. Instead, they sit close, letting words do the work that touch once would have rushed. The silence that follows is no longer a shield but a shared space where neither feels judged or diminished. Part 5 is crucial because it equalizes them emotionally. Neither is rescuing the other. Neither is confessing weakness to gain comfort. They are simply recognizing each other as whole people who chose this life with eyes open. Elias begins to understand that love does not always arrive as it can arrive as recognition. Clara, in turn, sees that Elias's guarded nature is not rejection, but caution earned through loss. By the end of this part, the marriage is no longer defined by duty or survival alone, but by mutual understanding. The mountains remain harsh, the future uncertain, but something solid has formed beneath those realities. Trust. And trust, unlike passion, does not fade with storms. It settles, steady and enduring, quietly preparing the ground for a choice that will no longer be driven by fear, but by intention. Marks the quiet turning point where understanding becomes commitment. Not through grand declarations, but through deliberate, everyday choices. As winter loosens its hold and the mountain begins to thaw, the external change mirrors Elias's internal shift. He no longer treats the marriage as a temporary arrangement or an obligation to be endured. Instead, he begins to move as though Clara's presence is not incidental, but essential. This is shown in small but meaningful ways. He asks her opinion before making decisions, waits for her to finish speaking instead of assuming silence, and adjusts his routines to include her without thinking of it as a sacrifice. These changes are subtle, yet profound, because they signal that Elias has stopped guarding himself against attachment. Clara notices, not with surprise, but with quiet acceptance, as though she has been waiting for him to arrive at this place in his own time. One evening, without ceremony or explanation, Elias reaches for her hand. The gesture is simple, almost hesitant, but it carries the weight of every wall he has dismantled to make it possible. Clara's response is immediate and unguarded. She does not question his intent or test his resolve. In that shared touch, the marriage shifts from something agreed upon to something chosen. Love, when it comes, does not erupt like fire, it settles like certainty. The mountain, once a measure of endurance, becomes a place of belonging. Elias realizes that what once felt like confinement now feels like purpose. He is no longer surviving the days, he is building them. Part 6 is essential because it demonstrates that transformation does not always announce itself with drama. True change often reveals itself through consistency, through the willingness to let another person matter in the smallest decisions. Elias does not become a different man. He becomes a fuller one. Clara, too, is changed not because she is saved, but because she is met with equal intention. Together, they redefine what strength looks like, not isolation, but partnership. Not endurance alone, but shared direction. By the end of this part, the reader understands that the love between them is no longer fragile or tentative. It is grounded, tested, and chosen daily. The mountains remain unchanged, but within them, a life has taken root that is no longer shaped by fear of loss, but by confidence in what has been built and in the hands they now walk beside. Introduces external temptation and confirms the depth of Elias' transformation by forcing him to choose between the life he once believed he wanted and the life he has quietly built. The letter from the valley represents comfort, security, and escape, the very things Elias once assumed were incompatible with the mountains. It offers steady work, warmer winters, and the approval of a society that never understood his choice to live apart. Earlier in his life, such an offer would have felt like rescue, a way out of isolation without admitting defeat. Now, however, the letter lands differently. Elias watches Clara read it, noting how she does not plead or persuade. She folds the paper calmly and tells him she will follow his decision wherever it leads. Her response is not indifference, but trust, and that trust weighs heavier than any promise of ease. Alone that night, Elias confronts the truth he has been circling since the storm. The mountain is no longer something he endures for himself alone. It is where his life has taken shape, where love arrived without conditions, where he learned that strength does not diminish when shared. Burning the letter is not an act of defiance, but of clarity. He is not rejecting opportunity. He is affirming belonging. The act signals a final break from the man who equated fulfillment with escape. When Clara sees the ashes, she understands without words. Her smile is not triumphant, but peaceful, because the choice was his and it was made freely. Part 7 is crucial, because it removes any remaining doubt about Elias's intentions. Love is no longer circumstance-driven, it is deliberate. By choosing the mountain, Elias chooses the life he has built with Clara, accepting hardship not as a burden, but as a shared reality. 2. The outside world fades in importance, no longer defining success or happiness. What matters is continuity, presence, and the quiet confidence of a life rooted where it stands. This part reinforces the story's central message. Fate is not rewritten by dramatic escape, but by the courage to remain where meaning has taken hold. Elias does not turn away from comfort out of pride, but because he has discovered something richer than ease, a sense of home that cannot be offered by any valley, no matter how warm or welcoming it may seem, brings the story to its emotional and thematic culmination, showing the full transformation of Elias' heart and life as the consequences of choice and love settle into permanence. Years have passed, yet the mountains remain as challenging as ever. A reminder that life has never been easy, but the cabin, weathered, sturdy, and warm, now echoes with laughter and light. Children's voices, once unimaginable to Elias, fill the spaces he had thought only for solitude, signaling a life built not out of duty but out of shared joy. He often reflects on the man he once was, the one who believed love was a weakness, a liability to survival. That man, cautious and closed, seems almost like a stranger, replaced by someone capable of vulnerability and of recognizing the strength found in partnership. Clara, standing beside him, embodies all that has changed. Resilience tempered with tenderness, independence matched with devotion, a presence that rewrote the rules Elias had imposed on himself. Their marriage, which began as a practical arrangement to endure the harsh winters, has transformed into a life deliberately chosen, full of warmth, laughter, and shared purpose. The mountains, once a symbol of isolation, now serve as the backdrop to a story of enduring love, illustrating that true survival is not measured by solitude, but by connection. Elias's journey demonstrates that what seemed like inevitability, coldness, duty, emotional restraint, was never the only path. It merely took the presence of someone extraordinary to reveal that life could be fuller, richer, and more meaningful. By the end of this final part, the reader sees that Clara did more than change Elias's daily existence. She rewrote his fate entirely. The man who once climbed the mountains to escape attachment, now embraces it, recognizing that love is not a weakness, but the strongest force of all, capable of transforming even the harshest of landscapes into a home. The story closes not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet certainty. Elias expected a cold, duty-bound marriage, yet what he received was a life of warmth, partnership, an enduring joy of fate, rewritten by choice, by courage, and by love.